Have you ever had vertigo? It's this awful dizziness that causes you to lose your sense of equilibrium. I've had it. It's terrible. You wake up in the morning and sit up in bed, and the whole room spins. It feels like you're on a roller coaster ride and can't get off. If you've had it, you know exactly what I mean. If you've never had it, I hope you never get it. It's one of the worst feelings I've ever experienced. This week, I was reading this book called Flesh by Hugh Halter. Halter talks about vertigo, but not physical vertigo. He writes about spiritual vertigo. Specifically, he asks this profound question: can you identify the people, things, or experiences that have disoriented you spiritually? This got me thinking about my own life. I remember back in high school getting involved with a girlfriend who drew me away from Jesus and not towards him. I remember when my church fired my youth pastor because they couldn't afford him, and then voted to spend more money on a new kitchen. I remember when my wife and I struggled in our marriage during that first year. I was a youth pastor and didn't know how to figure out a struggling marriage in the context of my ministry. I especially remember 2 years ago when my church plant was imploding all around me, and I had people telling me that God had turned his face away. I remember believing those lies and doubting whether God could still use me for his kingdom work. All of these experiences shook my faith. They made me question what I believed. They left me spinning and unsure which way was up and what was true. Spiritual vertigo can be miserable. It rocks the very foundation of your life. This feeling of spiritual disorientation is one we've all experienced. It can sneak up on us out of nowhere, and we're left wondering how to respond. Our typical answer is to try to fix it, or fight it, or use some sort of religious exercise to make it go away. And that makes perfect sense, but the Bible suggests something entirely different. In Matthew, Jesus makes this amazing offer: "Come to me, all you who labor and are weighed down, and I will give you rest." And we see that put into action over and over again. The woman at the well, who had been married 5 times and was on her 6th man when she meets Jesus. The blind man named Bartimaeus, who screamed loudly and refused to stop because he was so desperate to see. The Pharisee Nicodemus, who came to Jesus at night because he had so many questions that he was afraid to ask. Or Mary Magdalene, who had 7 demons in her when Jesus met her. I could go on and on. Of course, in a culture that places so much emphasis on self-reliance, and in churches that are so afraid of doubt and difficult questions, it can seem so counterintuitive. But wherever we think the answer is, the only real cure for spiritual vertigo is to let it go and lay it at Jesus' feet. One time when I was speaking at a camp, I talked about the blind man that Jesus healed by putting mud on his eyes. The disciples saw him and asked Jesus if it was he who sinned or his parents. Jesus tells the disciples that this man's blindness happened so that God could be glorified. He then proceeds to take mud, wipe it on the man's eyes, tells him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam, about a quarter mile away. He does this, and his eyes are healed. I asked the kids to think about their own need to be healed. I then invited them to the front of the chapel and get mud on their face, to go to the lake and wash it off so they could experience Jesus' healing touch. One kid after another went into the lake, asking the Lord to heal their spiritual disorientation. But one girl caught my eye. While everyone else started to leave, she entered the water, got on her knees, crawled in up to her chest, began to wash her face over and over again. After I watched her for over 15 minutes, I went into the lake and got her. I told her that the Lord Jesus had heard her cry and he had healed her. The next day, I got word that this girl had signed herself up for camp because her parents were alcoholics and she just needed to get away from their abuse. Then she told her counselor that Jesus had met her there in the water and things were different now inside. She was a new person. Are you suffering from spiritual vertigo? Has life hurt you and left you doubting? Are you unsure which way is up? Are you questioning what's really true? Jesus is big enough for your doubt and your pain and your questions and your confusion. Go to him. Really approach him. Surrender and lay it all down. Put some mud on your face and ask Jesus to wash you and heal you. Whatever you've been through, whoever you think you are, He is there, ready to make you into a new person.